Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the XYZ Podcast. I'm your host, X, and today we're going to be talking quite extensively about the skill curve and why silksong is so hard to many people, but also why it's actually not as hard as people make it out to be. So, whether you're on your morning commute, you're doing something, you just, getting some housework done, doing something, and have me on in the background. You just want to listen to something? Or you're just trying to get some shut-eye? We welcome you. Please enjoy. So, the hit game Hollow Knight Silksong has recently released. And oh my god, it is the perfect game. Let me explain. So yeah, for every little thing it has, for every one little issue that it has, I mean, it does have every now and then one little issue. But the thing is, it is a beautiful game. And that cannot be understated. But still, I see a lot of people doing giving a lot of bad reviews for Hollow Knight Silksong. And I wanted to go over some of it and explain to you guys, hopefully, why Silksong is actually not this horrible game. And why it's actually a pretty decent game when you get down to it. So, first things first. In order to know, one of the biggest issues that people have with Silksong is Silksong's difficulty curve. Now, where exactly is the difficulty curve? Because the key thing about figuring out how to fix the difficulty curve is locating where the difficulty curve is. And, well, my friend Rainbow Moss and I have, mostly Rainbow Moss to be honest, have figured out where Silksong's difficulty curve is. You see, while yes, I do admit that it is it's very nice to have bragging rights about, how I actually did Clockwork Core. I actually got through most of Act 2 before before the game patch came out. Or, having a lot of bragging rights about that. The thing is, I 100% do agree that those buzzsaws should not have done double damage, and that the worm ground and blasted steps should not do double damage, and they fixed that. I also believe that Sister Splinter wasn't too bad of a boss fight, but definitely could have used the difficulty nerf. However, the boss fight of Morwing did not deserve that nerf, at all. No, it did not. Now, do I think that there are other things that in the game that deserve a difficulty curve? That deserve a change in difficulty overall. Yeah, I do. The Silksong does definitely have its issues when it comes to its difficulty. Whether it be everything in the game doing double damage, or the arena and high halls. But I don't exactly think that that's a bad thing. In fact, I'd say that the only thing that they have to fix up now is just, maybe add an extra bench or two in some of the worst areas. But, honestly, what I'd suggest is adding a new fast travel system. So, obviously, the Ventrica system is very, very nice to have. However, I feel like we need Dreamgate again. And I feel like I would. Ooh. Now, another thing is, thanks to Rainbow Moss and mostly when I say that I mean Rainbow Moss's experiments, we have actually learned where the real difficulty curve is. And no, it is actually not the double damage. In fact, it's something that I don't see a lot of people criticizing. Mostly because they think, oh hey, this has been upgraded massively. What if I told you that the difficulty? What if I told you that the difficulty curve of Silksong is actually placed in its healing? You see, people kind of got used to Hollow Knight's bosses, where if you found a proper healing opportunity, I mean, not a lot of Hollow Knight bosses did double damage, plus you got a generous amount of health. So, people got used to doing the wrong thing. People got used to being able to heal twice and take one damage. But Silksong, no, Silksong does not allow that. Silksong gives you, and you might be wondering, like, how is this possible? It's a pretty decent length heal. I mean, it's a little bit longer than the Hollow Knight heal, just a little bit, but it heals 3 masks. I mean, obviously the issue is in the fact that the enemies do double damage. Well, what if... Well, look at it from a different perspective. Instead of, blaming the fact that the enemies are threats, as they should be, instead maybe look to how your gameplay is. And I know, that's a controversial thing to think of. Like, of course my gameplay's not the issue. Everyone has their own style of gameplay. I hate to break it to you though. Some people's style of gameplay is just wrong. Silksong allows you to heal midair, yes. And a lot of people might think that that's safe. However, a lot of bosses very smartly have a way to counter that. Yes, there's healing opportunities. However, they're few and far between. The game, like Hollow Knight failed to do, is trying to teach you that instead of damage boosting, you should instead focus on dodging. And that's where I think some of the best bosses in the game come in. The Last Judge has a one attack where it's very clear that you can get some easy hits in, but other than that, I mean, almost nothing. Clockwork Dancers, yeah, you can get a lot of hits in, but you have to contemplate each and every one of their attacks. And you can never go into the middle of the arena, because if you do, then, well, you're screwed. And I mean, Grandmother Silk, the only time, really the only times that you can actually heal in the Grandmother Silk fight are during staggers, if we're talking about healing safely. And yeah, I know that they implemented the warding bell, but think of it. Think about this for a second here. Warding bell is very similar to Baldur's Shell. But what Baldur's Shell was implemented to do, I believe, is try to show you, basically give you a cushion to show you where healing opportunities are. The game is not, the difficulty curve isn't hard. You just learned the wrong thing. And when you think about that, everything else gets put together. I mean, really, how hard are the attacks? I mean, really, if you think about it, how bad is taking double damage if you learn the attacks well enough to dodge them so that I mean, like, you get hit once, but then the boss gets hit into his dagger and oh, you have more than enough silk to do damage right after healing. The warding bell there, it gives you a lot more cushion than Baldur's Shell does. It persists a little bit after you fully heal. So, it can tell you, basically, if you can use it as a defense, as an offensive thing, if you learn how to really sneak in those heals. And, warding bell does do damage to enemies. Or, it can be used as a, oh, sorry champ. Honestly, I understand. It's not like a, haha, you only survived that because warding bell. It's less of that and more of warding bell saying, hey champ, so I noticed that you tried to heal. And you did a good job gathering up all that silk and whatnot, but I gotta be honest, you kind of screwed up that healing opportunity there. Don't worry, we all make those mistakes. Even Fireborns made those mistakes before. It's perfectly fine, everyone does it. Just try again, and you know what, for your troubles, I'll do a little bit of damage to the boss for you. And that can sometimes save you in certain arenas. For example, just today, I had to deal with an arena where I almost died. And so I tried to heal. And you know what happened? Well, I got interrupted from the heal because I mistimed the heal. But Warding Bell's just like, yeah, I see the issue here. Don't worry, I gotcha. And then took out the last enemy. And if you didn't understand anything of what I just tried to say, I'm basically trying to say, Warding Bell is trying to help you here. It really seems that Warding Bell is built to help you learn healing opportunities. This game, I've been reading some bad Hollow Knight Silksong reviews, and a lot of them criticize the game for being way, way, way too challenging and way, way, way too punishing with large runbacks and everything. But where Silksong has longer runbacks, and Hollow Knight has shorter runbacks, Hollow Knight also has, a protagonist that can't walk very fast and and you have to equip the special charm to be able to sprint or run or dash much faster, but then that screws up with, downward attacks. Or, you have Silksong's protagonist where, yes, we have longer runbacks, but also Hornet is much more dexterous. Hornet can, do a lot more acrobatics than the Knight could. Now, another thing that I hear talk a lot of... Oh yeah, also I should mention this. One thing that a lot of people don't seem to notice is that, in Hollow Knight, we play as the Knight. And the Knight is not a squishy thing. The void, well, then the void is quite malleable, but that's the thing. It's squishy, but squishy in a way that, heavy attacks clearly bounce off, clearly should do extra damage, but do bounce off of it. Sorry, I just got a text from the creative type, and it was the dumbest stuff ever. Anyway, though, what was I saying? Oh, yes. With Hornet's clearly not at her peak. Yeah, she's rested and whatnot, but you gotta understand, by the point of Act 3, not only is she going up against the Abyss, which the Abyss consistently always does double damage, and that's something that I think a lot of people failed to mention in their reviews and their complaints about Hollow Knight Silksong. Why would Abyss creatures not do double damage? Creatures made from the void have always had attacks that do double damage. Actually, Lostkin. Broken Vessel doesn't always do double damage. Yes, however, I believe that Lostkin actually does have multiple attacks that do double damage. But also, I want to remind you that Lostkin and Broken Vessel obviously don't always do double damage. Why do they always not do double damage? Well, it's probably because they're not actually creatures made out of a void. They're creatures made. Lostkin and Pure Vessel are pure infection. It is a literal corpse of a vessel completely controlled by the infection. The Knight has attacks that don't do double damage. Sorry, the Hollow Knight does attacks that don't do double damage, but that's a void-based creature. Yes. However, another prime example of technicalities and story-based boss fights. You see, the Hollow Knight. The thing about the Hollow Knight is that although not every single attack does double damage, canonically, that is not the Knight at its peak. And we actually do see the Knight at its peak. The Pure Vessel fight in Godhome is the Hollow Knight at its peak performance. No infection in it. Not worn down by the years. Not a broken blade. And I've literally never gotten hit by an attack from Pure Vessel that didn't do double damage. Now, I'm not gonna go into the Collector, because obviously the Collector is being purely made out of void. However, everyone agrees the Collector's kind of this odd case. I mean, literally none of the other void-based creatures have dream nail dialogue, except for the Collector. So, the Collector's obviously a little weird. However, I feel like one outlier is fine. Because then we got the King's Molds. And no, I'm not going to talk about the Wings Molds. See, the thing about the Wings Molds is that, yes, they're made out of void. However, counter-argument is that they are much less of void-based entities. And also, they're not actively hostile. They just kind of stay there. And if you get hit by contact damage, I mean, almost nothing in Hollow Knight does double damage for contact damage. But, want to know the most void-based creature? That is, at its peak, at its prime, void-based, and is built to be actively hostile. Using all the good fury that is in the void? King's Molds. And guess what? Every single attack that a King's Mold does double damage. What I'm trying to get at is that King's Molds and King's Molds, Pure Vessel, all these are great examples of the fact that by Act 3, I would expect everything that is taken over by the void to do extra damage. In fact, also, we have a canon reason why a lot of enemies in Silksong do extra damage. The haunting, everything's kind of powered by Silk, and we've known that Silk is a very strong substance, possibly even a magical substance for a long time. I mean, we have the Weavers. In Hollow Knight, we knew that the Weavers were strong. And we also know that, some of the Weavers' silk, the stuff that they wove together, were some of the strongest things. We also know that they were quite great hunters. And so, that explains, also every single thing that we see visibly affected by the haunting and being controlled by Silk does double damage in Silksong. In fact, every attack that we see actively using Silk clearly does double damage to us. So, by Act 3, if it is void buffed and it is affected fully by the haunting, of course it's going to do double damage with every attack. I'm surprised it doesn't do triple, because or maybe even quadruple. But X or actually, there is actually an attack that does triple damage in Hollow Knight Silksong, you buffoon. Actually, that's factually inaccurate. You see, there is no attack in Hollow Knight Silksong, nor in Hollow Knight, that actively does 3 masks of damage. The attack in the Grandmother Silk boss fight, actually, if you think about it, and I'm gonna go into real science technicalities here, only does 1 damage each. It's a 3-hit combo, with no iframes in the middle, that take 3 swings and it does 3 hearts of damage to you, 1 heart each for each hit of the combo. Meaning that with Magnetite Dice on, theoretically, you could block all 3 of those hits, or only 2 out of 3. So how can we tell if an attack actually does 2 damage, or if it just does 2 hits of damage? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Think of let's see here. Let's go back to Grandmother Silk for a second. Think of Grandmother Silk's other attacks. they all clearly hit for 2 masks, right? 2 health down instantly. No pause before the other mask is gone or anything. Correct? Well, let's go back to pre-nerfed Kog'Maw Core, which was notorious for doing double damage. Well, you get hit by that. You got hit once for colliding with the hazard, and then again as an animation. That is not 2 damage, my friend. That is getting hit twice. Meaning that, although you cannot dodge it, it is 100% possible for Magnetite Dice to block it. Now, next up is another thing that I want to mention that I hear a lot of people talking about, and I really don't understand this. A Hollow Knight Silksong could not have been more clear at this point with this mechanic. Yes, rosaries are, the economy is kind of dead. That's part of the point. Yes, rosaries can be hard to come by at times. Why are you complaining about always losing all of your rosaries? Oh wait, yeah, these are the same people that don't seem to, understand. You can string up your rosaries. That's the entire premise. No, you're not valid because, because you're angry because, well, clearly Team Cherry didn't say anything about stringing up rosaries. 1, you get a lot of rosary strings. 2, literally almost every single shop in the game either sells you a shard bundle to give you extra shell shards, or can string up your rosaries in a rosary necklace or a rosary string. But my extra rosaries, it costs $20 rosaries to string up 60. I don't get all 80 rosaries strung up. Well, let's real quickly give it a non-Silksong example. Actually, 2. First one. Let's talk about Minecraft for a second. Have you ever wondered why the villagers give you money for, have you ever wondered why wheat farmers will give you money to sell them back their wheat? No, it's not because they're dumb and they just think, hey, extra wheat for me, right? No. It's because you just worked for the money. Or another example that's actually, I'd say better. Real life. In real life, you have in real life, people have jobs, right? Now, people do work for the business and do work for, other people, and in return, they get paid. It's the same premise here. You don't get all of your rosaries because these people you're literally paying for the labor of getting the rosaries. And you might be wondering, okay, so that makes sense, but what about the rosary stringing machines? Well, think about it like this. Yeah, the rosary stringing machines definitely do, exist, and they definitely will give you, they definitely will string up your rosaries, but it's still the same price. But also think about, another thing. These things still work on the same idea. Just because it's an automatic system doesn't mean that it doesn't take money to maintain. Plus, if people get their hands, In fact, we even see what happens if the wrong people get their grimy little hands on the mechanisms that string up the rosaries. That's why they need to keep the rosary he he machines maintained, plus also make sure that people don't hijack it. But what happens when someone steals the rosary machine stuff, you might ask? Well, that's quite simple. The rosary cannon starts existing. Hornet, literally, he breaks off a piece of a rosary stringer and then starts carrying it around. And what it does is it literally launches rosaries at her enemies at quite a rapid pace. She turned the rosary stringer into a weapon. But hey, if all of that, if all that's not enough for you, then I give you this. The reason why rosary stringers take extra rosaries to use and only string up 60 of your 80 rosaries for you is because that is how Farloom implemented their tax. Gotta keep the Citadel up and going nicely. And I'm gonna be honest, probably takes a lot of rosary to, do all that. Plus, I mean, 20 rosary. I mean, we literally see the person who seemingly turns all the gears within the underworks, which seemingly and supposedly does all the basically keeps the Citadel going. And what I can say for 100% certainty sorry, let me catch my breath and refocus my thoughts. What I can say for 100% certainty is that for whoever else is supposed to be down there, helping run the treadmill besides the one guy who just does it for fun, it pops out one rosary per time that you reach the limit bar. So probably one rosary per a few seconds to a minute. And not just one rosary bead, no, I'm talking about a singular rosary. Which, I mean, is a nice way to actually passively farm. Definitely not efficient at all, but definitely is an existent way to passively farm. But think of how long you would have to power the underworks for 20 rosary to get 20 rosary. So, oh yeah, also I should mention, if you look around enough and you do save up enough money, you can get 2 items known as the thieves mark, or snitches mark or something, and then the snitch pick. What the snitch pick allows you to do is use your silk line, I think it's silk line ability to grapple into enemies and literally rip extra rosary or shell shards from them. And if you have Thieves' Mark, although you do lose more rosaries per hit, you gain more rosaries. And you gain more rosaries from enemies. And all of this combines into a nice way to easily farm Rosary. And you also get another um another charm that allows you to gain extra shell shards. I mean, just pop that on and pop the mark of the snitch's mark on, and you just spam the heck out of snitch pick. Suddenly, wait a bit, and suddenly you're never gonna have to deal with having issues with Rosary again. That is, unless you don't string it up. And that's a big thing. String it up. Another thing is that you should used to be using tools. Seriously. Tools are amazing. In fact, there is a tool that if you are curious about tools in this game, there's a tool for everything. Have issues with platforming and want to make sure that if you fall, you're not gonna, fuck everything up. And you're not gonna take immediate damage. Well, use the Delphis drill. I kid you not, it does not you do not lose uses of Delva drill unless you hit an enemy with it, put it away too early, or hit the ground with it. But if you hit an obstacle with it, you don't lose that. Plus, even if you did, it gives you a nice second, which can be very, very useful. And last but not least, you should probably think about getting good. Now, real quickly, how long have I been recording for? 37 minutes. You see, I had a different idea planned for the podcast episode today. However, that didn't work out fully because of somebody forgot that I record these. I try to record these like once a month, but once in a while. And I always try to record them at night, so I'm not, recording these in anyone's way. But I mean, yeah. So let's try to pad out the runtime a bit for you guys. So, how can you get better at silksong? Well, first things first, experiment. And also, just because you keep on dying over and over and over again doesn't mean that the boss's design is bad. I mean, yeah, dying over and over and over again is irritating. I fully understand that, but just think how much okay, when I finally beat the High Halls Arena, no, I didn't get that super large wave of just sheer pleasure that certain bosses give you, but I didn't just feel like, oh, great, I don't have to deal with that again. I felt like, oh, yes, it's finally done, it's finally over, I actually managed to beat it. It didn't feel the best. No, you know what, screw that. It did feel like the best. It felt so good. So that's an easy way to get better at silksong. Understanding when that, it's not always actually the fact that it's a bad game, but sometimes it's the fact that it's a really hard boss. So instead of going in there here's one that helps me a lot. Instead of going into a boss arena and thinking, and keeping on dying and thinking, God dang it, why is this boss so difficult? It's unfair. It's dumb. Why does it do double damage every single second? And I used to be that way too. Instead, go into the boss arena, and every time that you die, think, okay, did I get anywhere with that? Did I learn anything new? Did I get a chance to practice any of my strategies? Did any of those strategies pay out? If so, how can I improve on them? If not, how what other strategies may work? But all in all, always think, always tell yourself at the end of a boss fight, at the end of an attempt of a boss fight, when you die, never just say, oh, that's dumb, that's unfair. Always think, okay, where might have I gone wrong? Be in a more positive mindset. Trust me, it helps so much. When I started doing it, I'm gonna be honest, I was kind of skeptical myself about it. But when I started doing it and actually, putting in the effort to actually, try it and everything, I eventually realized, hey, this actually does work. So now every time that I'm facing off against a hard boss, I will think to myself, okay, well, that's fair enough. Okay, that's fair enough. What can I do to improve? But you also gotta understand that you shouldn't do this with every boss. For example, Grohl the Great. That is just by far a pretty mean boss. And it's designed to be pretty unfair and pretty mean. And instead of immediately saying like, how could I improve upon this fight or anything, you might start thinking, well, how can I skip this fight? And you might think, hey, skipping fights and whatnot, that's unreasonable. You shouldn't do that. Well, don't take it from me. Take it from one of Team Cherry's official statements. I believe that there is at least one official statement where Team Cherry straight up says that their belief in games is that, yeah, they'll set a way for you to actually play it properly, but if you can find a way to break their game and whatnot, all power to ya. In fact, in Hollow Knight, they only patched out the speedrun glitches that made their game just straight up look unpolished and bad. For example, lever skips. Now, they could have fixed up Queen's Garden acid skip, or they could have done something to fix up shade skips, but they never did. Why not? Why did they never do that? Well, it's because Team Cherry is on the side of us. They want to make a challenging game, but they also want to make a really challenging game that will make everyone happy. But that's an issue when it comes to people who loved Hollow Knight but want a challenge from Hollow Knight. Now, other ways to get better at silksong. Well, utilize every single resource that the game has to offer. If it's there, utilize it. And experiment with other things. Remember, it's okay to die. Seriously. It is okay if you take a death in silksong. it is always okay if you take a death in silksong. No one's gonna get mad at you or judge you. And you shouldn't judge yourself. Okay. Also, on the topic of utilizing resources, do not forget that movement resources can also be used as combat resources. Silk, silk, not needle, and silk line. Or, as I like to call it, grapple. Silk line is a very good it's a very good example. It's a very good example of, hey, that one there, that can actually be used for combat. In fact, in first Sinner boss fight, it is, I'd say that you should utilize Silk Line a lot more, because you get a lot more staggers with it. Now, is there anything else that I can think of? I mean, obviously try charm and combos and synergies. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Oh, here's one. Don't list just because someone tells you that one charm is the best, doesn't mean that it's good for you. For example, in Hollow Knight, I used a lot of little buddy charms. Yeah. But my charm loadout was actually one that I got recommended to me. And we learned that it was not exactly the best charm loadout. Now, I did eventually beat the game with said charm loadout, but that's only because I actually got good at the game itself. And don't hesitate to explore. It is a Metroidvania. Remember that almost nothing is as straightforward as it seems. A lot of people are getting upset about the last judge fight, but not a lot of people are realizing that you don't actually have to go through the last judge. In fact, in fact, you can go through the back end to get to Act 2. Getting to the back end of the game through Act 2 will take you through Biowater, which, I'm gonna be honest, Sinner's Road is really, really punishing, yes. Putrefied ducks can be really bad, yes. Biowater, however, upper Biowater, it's hell. Going up. Lower Biowater, however, is actually not too bad. Also, if you can get to the actual Biowater Bellway, then you don't have to actually deal with Biowater again to get to Act 2. You just simply go through the mist. And I'll give you a little tip. The whatever they're called, like wraiths or whatever, in the mist, they can be pretty easily dealt with, actually. In fact, I literally can 3-shot them, and I don't even have max nail. I think I might have nail 2, which is the second nail upgrade that you can get. Sorry, I should say needle 2. But after that, you get to the place known as the exhaust organ. And that gives you, and then you do a really fun boss fight against Phantom, which, I mean, Phantom has a lot slower attacks. Phase 2 can get a little chaotic, but by far, this path from Sinner's Road into Bilewater into the Citadel is literally the easy way. Is literally the it has more difficult platforming, yes, but if you are more into platforming, you go that way, and if you're more into combat, you go the Last Judge route. Now, I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. Yeah, it's been about 50 minutes. That's about good enough for this. So, in conclusion, if you don't like playing Silksong, if you think that Silksong is actively bad, okay, let me just redo that again. Try that again. If you think that Silksong is actively bad because it is just way too difficult and Hollow Knight was so much better, maybe instead of thinking about the negatives, think about the positives. Also, another thing is that and instead of like thinking, this game is horrible, think maybe something I'm doing is wrong. Now, if I had to ask for a permanent one-size-fixes-all solution to Hollow Knight Silksong's difficulty scaling, I would just do one thing and one thing only. I would add another difficulty mode. I would add, and it wouldn't be titled easy mode or anything. It would be like a new player mode or something. Maybe called easy mode, maybe called you know what? How about we call it ooh, here's one that's really good. How about we call it Silk Soul mode, then normal, then Steel Soul mode. And for Silk Soul mode, and when it comes to Silk Soul mode, really all that it does, really all that it would do, is add like, it would give you the easy variant. Add like 1 or 2 more benches and everything. But the biggest thing is that only bosses would do double damage. Only bosses, so only bosses and, much bigger enemies. None of the smaller enemies would do double damage. But for Silk Soul mode, have that be an introduction. And I would actually say, do not let people play Act 3 in Silk Soul mode. Kind of like how some games won't let you go and beat the entire game in easy mode. And in the easy mode, like for example Cuphead. If you beat every single boss in easy mode on Cuphead, you cannot progress. Have it be that silksong mode will let you get the first two endings, being Weaver Queen ending and the Twisted Child ending. And then for the other and then for Act 3, let make them, do normal mode or Steel Soul mode for Act 3. In fact, I would even say that you could let people switch the difficulty to normal mode for during Silk Soul mode. Just to give them allow them, tastes of normal mode. And I know that people may try to use this to get, easy into Act 3. But here's the thing. 1, you have to be at a bench. And 2, this Silk Soul mode. Actually no. The Silk Soul mode would only be toggleable. Well, will only begin to be toggleable at the end of Act 1. Not only that, but also, maybe make Silk Soul mode be like a I don't know, some sort of thing where you have to, not only do you have to be at a bench to turn it on or off, but also it would not affect any bosses. Or maybe just make it so that it's, you could copy over your save data so that you can go and hop right into Act 3. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. But if you did enjoy this episode of the XYZ Podcast, please consider liking and subscribing and commenting down below. It helps out the channel a ton. And I will see you all on the next episode. Goodbye.